Shloach yad bin vakshay ra'asam. What does that mean?
To send a hand to the...
Oh, here, on my hand. You know what I was a rabbi in Los Angeles. I had just finished putting all my kids to sleep, and then there's banging, on the door. The whole house wakes up. All the kids are up. We go to the door. I'm really upset. It's a Megillah, so you can't be upset. And Nebuch, this guy's a plastic hand. My heart breaks him. And he says, I said, look, you come to the shul tomorrow, we'll talk. Okay, you come to shul. Fine. Thank you very much. Next day, he comes to the shul. He gives me an envelope. He's not even here for himself. He lost his hand to cancer. Nebuch. Right? I lost my hand to cancer, Nebuch, but now I'm here for my wife and this and this. And I'm thinking, oh, this poor guy. First he loses his hand. Now his wife is dying of cancer. So I said, okay, give me your name and address, and I'll send you a check. So he goes, no, I need the check now. So I said, I can't, because I don't write checks. The treasurer, I tell the treasurer I want a check to go from the rabbi's fund, but I don't write any checks. So he starts saying, no, I need the check. I said, you get it. You can have it tomorrow. You can come by tomorrow and pick it up. I'll write you a check, don't worry. So he gets very angry. He starts waving his hands in the air, and the plastic hand goes...
Oh.
So I'm thinking, oy vey, the poor guy. And then underneath his plastic hand, guess what he had? A real hand. So now he's even angrier with me. Right? Of course, he's even angrier with me. So I said, look, I'm still giving you a check for your wife. Just come back tomorrow. And he picks up his hand. I'm scared he's going to try and hit me with it. And he marches out with all his dignity. He never came the next day. What does that mean? To send a hand against those who want to do bad to them. You already spoke about their enemies in the first pasuk. So the first pasuk is, right, they expected or they hoped to rule over the Jews. They didn't hope to rule over the Jews. They hoped to wipe out the Jews. What do you mean? And now the Jews ruled over their enemies. That's the first pasuk. So that's ruling over enemies, whatever that means. This pasuk is the Jews actually gather, and they gather to strike out with their hands against those who seek to do evil. Again, not against those who seek to kill them and murder them or steal from them. Those who seek. And this can only happen when they gather. In the first pasuk, it doesn't say the Jews gather. In this pasuk, it says they gather. And no man would even stand up to them. So something more is happening. No one will even stand up to them. Okay. Next, all the officers and military people are terrified of Mordechai, and therefore they're sending out the message that the Jews are in power. Then you go to verse 5, and the Jews kill by the sword, murder, and annihilate. I don't know the difference between murder and killing by sword and annihilate, right? And then they do whatever they want. What do you do whatever you want? If you've already killed by the sword, murdered, and annihilated, what else can you want to do?
They didn't pillage.
They didn't pillage. Because it says that no one took any...
It seems the order is less than optimal.
Right, except that if this was written, and it's in Ksuvim, it was written Baruch HaKodesh, they knew exactly what they were writing. So the question is whether you know how to read it.
I don't.
Is this like the Bracha B'Lam Hashim? Same concept?
It actually is. Yeah, there's a Rishon, I forgot who, I don't want to say who I think it is. Yeah, it's an incredible thing. You know that in this week's Parsha, Shmini, there are 19 birds that aren't kosher. Each one of the 19 birds that are listed not kosher, each one of the 19 birds correspond to one of the brachas of Shmoneh Esrei. So like the first, there's a whole sefer written about this. It's a fabulous sefer by Rabbi Yeshua Heller. So, like the first bird that's listed not kosher is the eagle. And that corresponds to the bracha of avos, because an eagle flies with its young on top. Because it says, I don't need to worry about other birds, I only need to worry about human beings shooting. So I'm going to put myself in the way of danger in order to protect my child, which was what a parent does for a child. So therefore, that's the bracha of avos. And it like the whole, it's a great sefer, like wild, typical Rabbi Yeshua Heller, like creative and it's fabulous. Anyway, yeah. So if you go his pshat v'lamoshim, it's really worthwhile, but you have to get up to there in order to understand how he's building up all the
So shlichus yad, for me, I've seen it a number of times in the Torah. It seems like an act of volition. If you want to call it sometimes with laser or with intent, rather than just something by accident. It's like, okay, this is definite. You know, like Avram sent his hand, and other places, Adam might send his hand forth, and so on. So that's the first thing here, is that they're going to do this with intent.
Okay, so which one is that? That's the.
Which
So
one?
what's the
Yeah.
first pasuk? What's Sonei Hemnem? They expected to rule. So now you got to understand. The minute the decree goes out that all the Jews are going to be wiped out, what does everyone feel about the Jews?
They're worthless.
And that they have power. I could do to you whatever you want. The minute Mordechai becomes, BMOC, so now all of a sudden, the big man on campus, so now all of a sudden the Jews are the ones that, right, the Jews are the ones who are going to be calling the shots, they're going to have more political power, so on and so forth. That's the only thing in the first pasuk.
But
First
that's the
pasuk
end.
is, the first pasuk.
No, but that's the end. They said that they can do whatever they want.
So that's that's how the whole thing begins, that the roles have been switched. Then the Jews understand that they need to gather together. Which is also a big stage, that they understand that now that they have this positive position, they have to work together, which is a very big step. What is it that they want to do? They want to, by directly, with volition, strike out against anyone who is seeking to harm them. At this point, this is not even war yet. So this is not self-defense, this is not war. You were one of those who tried, passing rules against us when you heard we were going to die, and you were the one who was trying to sell our property for $5 instead of, $1 million. You were the one who was pushing us around. You were the ones, it's for your daughter. You were the ones, doing all this. So then they went out, lishvach yad, as you said. An act of volition, they went out directly to punish anyone, because this sends a message. It's one thing for everyone to back off from the Jews. Okay, we'll leave you alone because right now you're in power. But remember, under Achashverosh, things are always fluctuating wildly. One day you're in power, the next day you're not, right?
It also counters Haman exactly, because his whole point was that everything is by chance. That all of your beliefs, that there's meaning and all of this, it's nothing. And I'll show you, I'll pick an arbitrary date on the calendar, and it happens to be whatever it happens to be, but you're done, you're finished. So, and I think this highlights the point of the party, of having the party. We have a party not because we're just trying to celebrate, we're having a party because we believe in something more. We don't just think that there's just chance, like, oh, it happens to be there's a tsunami, or it happens to be. I think that celebrating, even when there is destruction around you, it's like you know that there's something more than just what it seems like on the surface.
I'm not sure. I mean, I can't say that you're wrong, but I'm not sure that that's the real point. For a number of reasons. Did you get a shot one? Well, let's finish this first, then we'll get to it. I don't think you're wrong. Haman also believes that God is in control.
And Achashverosh also has that whole story with
Achashverosh believes that everything is predetermined. Or that there are auspicious times to do something, which is what he was waiting to see if this was an auspicious time to get rid of Vashti. But that's a whole different story, because if you look carefully, he says this was the policy of the king to consult with the people who knew about time, right? But if that was really the policy of the king, then certainly before decreeing that you're going to wipe out a nation, you consult with these people. So don't tell me, right, that you will always consult with someone before making a major decision when you never do it again in the Megillah and you're making major decisions all the time. So there's a lot more in you have to understand what Achashverosh is trying to do. And you have to understand how Haman is trying to do it. And if you recall, Haman never throws a lottery, right? You know that, right? Read the verse. Which verse is it? In Perek Gimel.
Feel poor.
Read on. What is that? What does Lifnei Haman mean? Does that mean he did it, or it was done in front of him?
The servants just throw.
That's right. But why would he do it like that?
Maybe he's afraid that his karma or Muslim or whatever.
I see. Is this someone who believes in chance? He doesn't believe in chance. If he believed in chance, would he have celebrated when it came out in Adar, the month when Moshe died? Because Moshe's original failure was with Amalek.
So you're saying he feels that if somebody else threw it, it protects him from this
Influencing events. He doesn't want it to be an expression of his desire. He believes that everything is so real. Haman doesn't not believe in chance. I mean, he believes in chance as much as we believe in chance. But he hates it. He hates the fact that God is in control. He can't take it.
Well, that's the distinguishing feature of Amalek, right?
They want chance, but they don't really believe in it. That's what their issue is. Of course they believe in Hashem. They're very big believers in Hashem.
So they can't handle it.
That's right.
That's what
Because
Achashverosh
it's like, Albert Einstein really struggled with this. Albert Einstein believed that if someone was a murderer, it was predetermined that he's a murderer. He said, I still don't want to take tea with him, but I don't believe he has a choice. So, what's his name? Richard Feynman, you know how he defined it? He said that if you want to understand about predestination and physics and quantum mechanics and everything else, you just have to imagine 3 different baseball umpires. Okay? One says, I call them the way I sees them. One says, I call them for what they are. And the third is, it's nothing until I call it. So quantum mechanics is obviously number 3, right? Nothing is true until I call it. Albert Einstein says, I call it the way they are, because my perception of it, because he believed this was the whole idea of Platonic mathematics, is that, there's a whole machlokas of whether the world speaks, creation itself speaks mathematics, or whether mathematics is our language that we are imposing on creation. It's a big machlokas, and it makes a whole big difference. You can't, M theory doesn't work if you believe that in Platonic mathematics, that nature itself, whatever. But the problem is that how is it possible that I am going to, that this creation has this language of mathematics, and I, an observer, have to figure out what the language of the universe is in mathematics, and as I derive the language of mathematics from what creation is telling me, I can begin to manipulate the creation. It just doesn't seem to flow and make sense. And it's a deep issue for physicists, trying to understand whether the world itself speaks mathematics, or whether it's a language that we are imposing in order to understand creation. Which is a whole, this is how Rav Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz understands the whole machlokas between Rav and Shmuel in the Haggadah. There's a machlokas of Maschel B'Gnus and Mesayim B'Shvach, that you have to begin with something bad and end with something good. So one says it begins from Avadim Hayinu Avaseinu V'Far B'Mitzrayim, and ends with Vayotzienu. The other one says Mitchila Avdei Avodah Zarah Hayavoseinu V'Achshav Kevanu Amakim Lavodah. So Rav Shlomo Levi holds that that's the whole machlokas about mathematics, whether mathematics is the language of the universe, and that simply numbers 4 questions, 4 suns, 4 cups of wine, who knows one, everything, is that we are trying to see if we can distill the language of mathematics in creation, and therefore you have to go back to Mitchila Hayu Avdei Avodah Zarah, right? Whatever. And or whether that the world is, everything is just fixed. There is no mathematics, that the Rebbeinu Shalom decided everything. And it just happened to be that the Rebbeinu Shalom decided that you're going to be slaves to Paro, and it's 2 different things, 2 totally different approaches to Avodas Hashem. It's all his Sfarim that we have of his, except for the Manos Levi, which is on Megillah Esther, are filled with his understanding of science. It's incredible. If you look at the beginning of his Parish of Shir HaShirim, he speaks about different lenses. And that in order to be able to see a pasuk, you have to understand optics. And that each one of the 3 branches of the menorah represents a different form of optics. And that when you understand that it's possible to shape things and to cut a piece of glass, and simply by the way you cut the piece of glass, you can see things that you never imagined possible from a distance, then you'll begin to understand how you have to shape the way you look at a pasuk in order to see its long-term message. Then he said there are other people who can't focus on words that are right in front of them, but now there are those who can shape a lens in such a way that if they put it right in front of their eyes, they can actually focus and see what's in front of them. So that there's part of the avodah of Torah Shabbat Peh is to teach you how to focus on what is there directly in front of you at the time. And he goes into a whole, it's more
like
complex.
having quadrifocals.
Yeah. It's just incredible, and he has concepts there that you really couldn't understand unless. I don't know how we got to that. All right, so here we're back on this pasuk.
You were talking about science.
The first part, the part before. They heard those who heard them. What that means?
Amalek being for the German.
So the first thing,
and then that also.
Right, the first thing is that the whole image of the Jews changed. But you have to understand that this whole thing of the image of the Jews changing, and therefore, the way they perceive themselves and the way other people perceive them is very iffy, because that is completely dependent on the way we act. As Devi said before, whether you're inside the cloud or outside the cloud. So, for example, inside the cloud or outside the cloud, because it says Amalek was able to attack those outside the cloud. So Rabbeinu Bachya says, outside. How would you be outside the cloud? You would be outside the cloud if you were the way you treated other people was not consistent with living inside the cloud. Doesn't mean that they literally were outside the clouds of protection, but it meant they didn't treat other people with menschlichkeit. The clouds couldn't protect them.
Well, it says that they attack the weaklings.
Right.
If you, the weaklings
Are the ones without
spiritually. Yeah.
L'Arachaim HaKadosh,
Oh, that's the Arachai. The
That's-
weaklings.
yeah.
The weakly spiritually attached. That's the Arachai.
Right. The Rabbeinu Bachya says it's those who were
Ethics.
ethically. The Arachaim HaKadosh says it was those who just weren't, they were not committed to what they were doing. The Nevardiker,
Eov.
the Nevardiker have a slightly different twist than the Arachaim HaKadosh. The Nevardiker says that, the way he phrases it, he says, you have a guy he does everything. He's learning, and he's keeping mitzvahs and everything, but he just doesn't want to be frum. He's never really present when he's there. He does everything. But there's a part of him that it just wishes he was out all the time. That's the person who's outside the cloud. And I remember when I was in Miami, so the shul secretary in the big shul, we rented some of the dorm rooms from the shul cottages. So the shul secretary was originally from Newport News, and my chavrusa was from Newport News. He knew her and her son. She had adopted a boy, and it was his bar mitzvah. So you sit down when someone was converted as a child, and you ask him whether he wants to be Jewish or not. So they sat down. They sat this kid down, and they said to him, you were adopted. I know. You were converted. I know. But you know that now you have to make a decision whether you want to remain Jewish or not. And the kid said, really? Have a choice? And they said, yeah. He said, are you nuts? No way I want to remain Jewish. He said, I'm not Jewish. So they said, no. And he got up and he went to a McDonald's and he was just like the happiest guy in the world. And he walked away. Right, his parents obviously were devastated. But never know. I mean, he came back, he lived with them, they adopted him, but not as a Jew. The shocking thing was that the kids he went to school with, because obviously he couldn't be in a day school anymore, were all jealous.
Well, what?
Jealous. He was 13. But the even bigger shock was, I was in yeshiva, and the guys were 21, 22, 23. I mean, these were very accomplished, big Talmidei Chachamim. This wasn't like just a yeshiva program. It was a serious program. And there were a few of them who were jealous too.
They expressed it?
Yeah.
Because?
You can do whatever you want.
That's what it said.
That's why you asked the convert, are you sure you really want to do this?
You don't understand how many people who are married, and you say to them, if you had a choice to be out, forget the kids, this and that, you had a choice to be out, what would you do? You don't want to know. You probably know, because the people you deal with. But how many people are in a marriage because they're stuck? Those are the people who are outside the camp. So asher v'nahafohu, and it was flipped. V'nahafohu means whenever it's flipped, it can flip right back. We don't celebrate v'nahafohu that everything was reversed, and you go into the whole Torah how everything was reversed. Everything reversed means it can go right back. It doesn't mean anything. You never know. Right? Remember all the Jews in Russia were praying that the Tsar would die? Who took the place of the Tsar? Lenin and Stalin. It was a huge mistake. they asked the Chafetz Chaim, like, why don't you just daven that Hitler should die? He said, well, I mean, maybe it'll be like just like in Russia when the Tsar died. It was before he was fully in power. They were scared of him. He said, you never know. V'nahafochu works both ways.
It's unstable.
That's what v'nahafochu is. Very good. He said it's unstable. Therefore, the celebration is not v'nahafochu. Well, see, God changed everything. V'nahafochu is understand that nothing you see is definitely going to remain that way. The next stage was they understood, therefore, that the only way they could deal with this was nikalu hayudim, pasuk beis, for them to gather together, and this was a universal thing of all the Jews in the kingdom of Achashverosh. They understood that there had to be nikalu, that they all had to work together as a unity. And they had to intentionally go out after anyone who was an enemy of the Jew or worked bad to send out a message. Once the Jews were getting out the message, we are going to literally go after anyone who was searching to harm us, no one had the courage to stand up to them. But that was still not enough. Once the Jews were doing this, then it says that all the military officers didn't stop the Jews. Why did they not stop the Jews? Because they were terrified of Mordechai. Because Mordechai was not only great in the house of the king, Pasuk 4, he was great beyond the house of the king. Because Mordechai introduces one thing into the kingdom that did not exist before he rose to this position of power, which was stability.
How?
That's why they Esther and Mordechai wait 2 months after Haman's death to raise the issue of a second letter. It's an unbelievable thing. If Achashverosh would authorize a letter on the day Haman was killed, Achashverosh will not survive as king. He can't send another letter 5 days later. He can't do it. He can't be seen as going back and forth and back and forth. People are already concerned about the instability. So what Mordechai and Esther have to do is, one, get a message across to Achashverosh, they care about his stability. 2, and he says this to them, how do you want me to do this? I can't take it back.
Wait, what was the first letter? The first letter where they can kill the Jews?
Well, Haman kind of changed it. You have to look carefully. It's not really what people think, but that the Jews can be killed.
That's not coming from Achashverosh, it's coming from Haman.
No, it's signed with the king's seal.
I know, but I thought the whole thing was that Achashverosh didn't want to appear that he doesn't want to take responsibilities for his actions.
He doesn't.
All
So,
coming
but
from
we
Haman.
didn't get to that part yet of how he allowed the letter to go out the way it did. But if you look carefully, the verse actually tells you that what they showed Achashverosh was not the real letter. Look at the difference in the grammar between the way the letter is signed and sealed and the way the second letter is signed and sealed. And you'll see that there's a different grammar, because what the letter Achashverosh authorized to be signed and sealed for Haman was not the letter that went out.
His first letter, what was it?
Third parak. First letter is in the third parak.
The first letter that Haman.
Yeah.
And
I
he
mean,
said
you
the
have to think about
second
it.
letter was 2 months after Haman.
Can I ask you guys something? The first letter that went directly from the king about, the important one, the really important one, that men are the bosses in the house and can speak English and not only Spanish. So, is that one signed with the king's seal? No,
The letter that was sent
it's
out.
just a letter.
It's a flyer.
So how come the first letter which is sent, his first official letter as king to all the things.
Because that was really from the king. The other one was from Haman. So
Therefore,
he needed the king's seal.
that's right. So therefore, what does it tell you about the king's seal?
That it means not from the king.
It's an incredible thing. The Megillah tells you that there already was a hint. That's why the king is. It's just. Where's the king take the ring to give to Haman?
From his palm.
Not from his finger.
No.
Right.
So
Right,
he had
he's
it ready
holding
to
it.
give.
Yeah.
He wasn't wearing it.
He wasn't wearing it.
So he knew.
Yeah. He just says, I can't take it back. I'm going to look terrible. Which they agreed. Do you understand how smart they are? Had they asked him right away, that would have been the end of the story.
Why couldn't Achashverosh take it back if it wasn't from him in the first place?
Because he looks bad.
But it wasn't from him.
It doesn't matter. It has his
Appearances
import.
are what counts.
By the way, this is the most fabulous thing. How many letters does Mordechai send out to the Jews? 2. He sends the first letter of Purim, and then he sends a Geras HaPurim Hazos Shenis, the second one. But whereas all the other letters are called Sifarim, Mordechai's is called Igeres, which is why we unfold the whole Megillah and we read it as a letter. Because Mordechai never claimed for this to be final and absolute. He's telling you that you're going to keep on looking at this story and you're going to find new things that you never saw before. You're going to find that I made mistakes. Which is why we read the Megillah twice. Every time you read it, you'll see something you never saw before. You'll ask a question. Maybe I intended, maybe I didn't, but there are millions of issues here. He never intended for it to be a sefer, an absolute end. He intended it to be a letter. And we go out of our way to read it as a letter to tell you you can't, the Megillah Esther is not something you just read, this is the authoritative story, because, by the way, nothing of the way the story is taught, if you just think about the basic text, is true. It's just not true. Achashverosh is not an idiot. He makes stupid mistakes, but he's not an idiot. Haman is a brilliant strategist. He's the worst kind of enemy to have. And Esther, she's my superhero. After the Healy monster. Next. So what does it mean? Do you want to go on, or you guys?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go, if you want, we could read the whole story. You'll realize that there's so much. It's like seriously. Guys, choose a pasuk, any pasuk, and you'll see that there's something you misread. Come on, pick a pasuk. Any pasuk. So, but look at the next thing. Mordechai, so now Mordechai adds this whole thing of stability. Then the Jews are able to smite in all their oyevehem. Okay? Now remember, in Pasuk Aleph, in verse 1 of chapter 9, they are referred to as sonehem, they're haters. In verse 5, they're not referred to as haters, but oyevehem. They're enemies. Makas cherev, kill them by the sword. V'hereg, murder. Va'avdan, annihilation. What is that? And then vayasu v'sonehem kirtzonam.
What pasuk?
I'm asking you now about Pasuk Hey. Paraktes Pasuk Hey.
Some of them could just attack with the sword.
Now, what do you do when you attack with the sword?
You have a known enemy that is.
And what do you do? Vayaku. What do you do with Vayaku?
You hit him with the sword.
And what happens when you hit him with the sword?
You kill him.
You want me to bring my sword to show you? Okay.
Depends on what kind of sword and how you're using it.
But if you have
You can stab, you can slice, you can chop, you can do all kinds of things.
But Makkah is,
My sword can do them all.
Yeah, I know.
Usually
Yeah,
cuts
cut
people
down.
in half.
Well, they have
Yeah. No, I don't go for that. Slice this way.
I know.
Makkah is an injury though, so isn't it?
No, Vayaku is...
Makkah.
Well, that's true.
Well, yeah,
Makkah-
is that like Bayachas and
Beherit sounds more like assassination or
And what's Vav done?
that would be almost like a total destruction of let's say their family or children, things like
Okay, and then what's Vayasu V'sonehim Kirtzonam?
That's what happened to them in the beginning, that when the takana was given out by Haman, by Achashverosh, that everybody could do whatever they wanted to Jews because they were already dead in a year, so they could do whatever they want.
Can I
So
ask
this
you
is the
guys a
reversal
question?
of an afoch.
Can I ask you guys a question? Who's fighting the Jews now?
Sounds like no one is.
Then who are they killing? 75,000 people? Are they nuts? The king's soldiers are protecting them, the Jews, helping the Jews. Mordechai's the Jews, the governors for the Jews. Who's fighting?
Not people are fighting them now, people who were their enemies.
That they
wanted to
took
do
care
that
of
evil.
already. That they took care of already. This is war.
That's a second. When the new government takes over, they search out, they know who eventually can be a danger.
Okay, so who are these 75,000 people attacking the Jews? That's a lot of people, don't you think? Aseris B'nai Haman, I understand. Who are these people? How committed are they?
Where was that person?
500 people in Shushan? Do you guys know what a serious amount that is for a walled city, a small walled city?
And these are
500 people?
important people.
And the whole city of Shushan was in turmoil. No one in Shushan wanted the Jews to be killed. That's old and fat.
Back or
So guys, who's fighting? So this is what we discussed in Olam Malshinim. Who were the Tzedukim, the Kohanim Gedolim, who went into the Kodesh Kadashim every year, knowing they would die?
You think the Jews were fighting amongst themselves?
No, these are people who know they're going to die, but they hate the Jews so much they're willing to fight.
Amalek,
That's how we know this is Amalek.
because it's implacable. There's nothing that can be done that can divert them.
That's right.
Say that again?
Their hatred, in other words, they know they're going to lose,
But
and they don't care.
Like it.
So, like
Like,
Hamas, you know.
exactly. In other words, they know what will happen to them, and they don't care. So you have to understand, this is beyond an enemy. This is beyond a
Is that a
hater.
hatred zealous?
This is someone who I will give up everything I have in order to fight you.
That's Hamas.
That is Hamas. That is Iran. Iran doesn't care if Israel will retaliate with a nuclear bomb. Okay, see, do
If they kill
it. But I'm going to heaven. I'm going to have 72 virgins. I'll be happy my first 72 days in Olam Haba. Okay, the rest of Olam Haba I won't be happy. That's why my son wants to start a religion where you get 72 experienced women.
Makes more sense.
Ahmadinejad recently brought up against the Jews. There were protests or perhaps attacks on the tomb of Mordecai and the tomb of Esther because of this part of the Megillah. He said, ancient Persians were slaughtered by Jews, and they should have their comeuppance. It was just a month ago in Persia.
So what's the solution to these people? And who did they kill?
Kill.
They killed 500 people, but who did they kill? Nobody was finding them.
What?
Well, does that kill us? I mean, they have no qualms. They demonstrated it very recently.
Yes.
Jen Baruch Hashem has figured out how we're going to live in Israel. We don't need to buy a house. We'll just get his and her prison cells for executing all the Palestinians that Jenny has on her mind.
I knew you had a tough side.
Jobs there, like oracles.
M16.
Like who?
Laura Goldstein.
There's also
Purim.
Yeah. Yeah, except you never hear the story of why he did what he did. Baruch Hu.
Well, listen,
What?
well, listen.
There was a whole stash of arms hidden right there. He was saving lives. It was not a... Okay, guys? So? We'll...
Keep going.
No, it's enough.
No.
It's enough. Thank you. Don't forget to make an ala gefen, al gefen.
And Gafna, actually. It's all Israeli wine.
Gefen.